The words crashed against my heart like shattered glass. "You're not family anymore." My own daughter, Rebecca, stood across from me in the living room I had spent 30 years making into a home, her face contorted with a rage I barely recognized. Behind her, my son-in-law Marcus nodded with cold approval, his hand possessively gripping her shoulder. The family photos that lined the mantelpiece seemed to mock me now, frozen smiles from happier times that no longer existed. I didn't move, couldn't move. The air had been sucked from my lungs, replaced with something heavier than grief. My fingers trembled against the polished oak table that had hosted countless family dinners, 25 Thanksgiving turkeys, birthday cakes, and homework sessions. "Mom, you need to accept reality," Rebecca continued, her voice steadier now, almost rehearsed. "We've discussed this with a financial advisor. At your age, you shouldn't be managing this house or Dad's estate anymore. The smart thing is to sign everything over to us. We'll take care of you. Take care of me." The words hung in the air between us, dressed up like concern but smelling of something else entirely. Something greedy. I was 67, not 97. My arthritis sometimes flared, but my mind was sharp as ever. Sharper, perhaps, than they realized. "Your father built this house with his own hands," I whispered, my voice catching. "Every nail, every board. And now he's gone." Rebecca cut me off. 3 years gone, Mom. And you're living in the past. This house is too big. It's worth nearly $2 million in today's market. It doesn't make sense for you to rattle around here alone when we could sell it. Get you a nice little condo near us. And invest the rest. Invest the rest. Into their dreams, not mine. The subtext was clear as day. "I need time to think," I said, feeling suddenly exhausted. Marcus stepped forward then, his lawyer's demeanor taking over. "Janet, we've prepared the paperwork already. It would really be easier to handle this today. For everyone's sake. For everyone's sake." Another lie dressed in Sunday clothes. I looked up at my daughter, my only child, the baby I had nursed through pneumonia when she was 4, staying awake for 36 hours straight while her fever raged. The girl I had put through college by working 2 jobs after Robert lost his position at the firm. The woman whose wedding had cost us our modest savings, but had been worth every penny to see her happy. "I'm not signing anything today," I said quietly but firmly. That's when it happened. That's when my world truly cracked open. Rebecca's face transformed, the mask of concerned daughter slipping away completely. "Fine," she snapped, slamming her designer purse onto my table. "Then we'll do this the hard way. Dad would be so disappointed in you right now. You know that, right?" I felt the blow land exactly where she intended, right in the center of my heart. Robert, my late husband, my rock, the love of my life for 43 years. "Your father would never," I started. "You don't get to speak for him anymore," Rebecca shouted, tears suddenly springing to her eyes. Tears I couldn't tell were manipulative or genuine. "You're being selfish and stubborn. This house should be our inheritance. Our future. For my children. Your grandchildren." I stood up slowly, my knees protesting. "I think you should leave now." That's when she said it again, this time with deadly quiet. "You're not family anymore. Not if you do this to us." They left a stack of papers on my table. Transfer of deed, power of attorney, a reverse mortgage application. My daughter didn't hug me goodbye. My son-in-law didn't meet my eyes. I stood in the doorway of my empty house as their Mercedes pulled out of the driveway, watching as they drove away with what I thought was everything I had left in the world. My family. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning. I didn't know then about the letter that would arrive 3 days later, from a lawyer I'd never heard of, with news that would change everything. My name is Eleanor Mitchell. Most people call me Ellie. I've lived in Oak Ridge, Connecticut for most of my adult life, a charming New England town with white church steeples and maple trees that turn fiery red every fall. This house on Sycamore Lane has been my home for 35 years. It's where Robert and I moved when he made partner at his law firm. It's where we raised our daughter. It's where I held my husband's hand as cancer slowly claimed him 3 years ago. Every morning since Robert's death, I've followed the same routine. I wake at 6:30 a.m., brew a pot of coffee, still a full pot, though I'm the only one drinking it now, and take it to the sunroom where I watch the birds at the feeder Robert built. Cardinals mainly. They were his favorite. Sometimes I catch myself narrating the birds' activities aloud, as if he were still sitting beside me in his worn leather chair. After breakfast, I water the plants, take a short walk around the neighborhood if weather permits, and then settle into volunteer work. Most days it's the literacy program at the library, teaching adults to read. 3 days a week I help at the community kitchen. Keeping busy keeps the silence at bay. My friends, the few who remain after so many moved to Florida or Arizona, or worse, to assisted living facilities and nursing homes, worry about me being alone in such a big house. Marjorie from my book club mentions her daughter's mother-in-law's lovely senior community at least once a month. My neighbor Frank, a widower himself, brings me tomatoes from his garden and not so subtly suggests we could save on expenses if we combined households. But this house is more than walls and a roof to me. It's where Robert's height marks still pencil the kitchen door frame, showing his gradual shrinking in those final years. It's where the third stair still creaks, the sound so familiar I find it comforting rather than annoying. It's where I know which window to open exactly 3 inches to create the perfect cross breeze on summer nights. I'm not rich, but I'm comfortable. Robert's life insurance paid off the remaining mortgage. His pension and my Social Security cover my modest needs. I drive a 10-year-old Volvo that runs perfectly fine. I clip coupons out of habit rather than necessity. What my daughter doesn't understand, or chooses not to, is that I don't need much. My treasures aren't in my bank account. They're in the quilt Robert's mother made for our wedding, now faded but still warming my bed. They're in the collection of sea glass we gathered over decades of beach walks. They're in the photographs covering every surface: Rebecca's first steps, family vacations, graduation days, the wedding. I trace my finger over that particular silver frame often. Rebecca in white lace, Robert in his best suit, his arm around her waist, both of them beaming. The father-daughter dance that evening had everyone in tears. "The way you look tonight," Robert sang softly along with the band, slightly off-key but with so much love. It was shortly after the wedding that things began to change. Marcus came from money. Old money, Connecticut money. The kind that whispers rather than shouts. The kind that assumes control as a birthright. At first it was small things. Suggestions about our investment portfolio, comments about the house's dated charm, questions about our estate planning that seemed premature for a couple in their early 60s. Then Robert got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4 by the time they found it. The 18 months that followed were a blur of hospitals, chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments. Rebecca visited, of course, but always seemed uncomfortable, always had somewhere else to be. Marcus came less frequently. Their children, my grandchildren Emma and Jacob, then only 7 and 5, were too sensitive to see their grandfather diminish, Rebecca explained. So I cared for my husband largely alone, learned to change IV lines, to administer morphine, to interpret the language of pain when he could no longer speak it aloud. I slept in a chair beside his hospital bed, installed in our living room during those final weeks. I read to him from his favorite books when his eyes grew too tired to focus on the pages. I played Sinatra records and held his hand as he drifted in and out of consciousness. When he died, it was a Tuesday morning in April. The cherry trees were blooming outside our window. A cardinal, bright red against the pink blossoms, landed on the sill just as Robert took his final breath. I like to think it was a sign, though of what I couldn't say. The funeral was lovely, as such things go. Rebecca managed the arrangements efficiently. Marcus gave a polished eulogy that somehow missed the essence of who my husband truly was. There was a reception afterward at their home, a sprawling colonial in the most exclusive part of town. I felt like a guest rather than family, watching as people I barely knew reminisced about a version of Robert I hardly recognized. That was 3 years ago. Since then, Rebecca and Marcus have included me in major holidays, though always at their house, never mine. The grandchildren have grown more distant, absorbed in their private schools and exclusive summer camps. Phone calls grew shorter, visits less frequent. Last Christmas, my gift to Rebecca, a bracelet that had belonged to my mother, remained in its box, clearly unappreciated next to the designer presents Marcus had arranged under their 12-foot professionally decorated tree. I told myself it was natural. Children grow up. They build their own lives. They don't need their parents in the same way. I made excuses for the growing distance, the increasingly transparent impatience. Until today. Until you're not family anymore. As I cleaned up the kitchen after they left, my hands shaking so badly I broke one of my everyday plates. I couldn't stop hearing those words. couldn't stop seeing the cold calculation in my son-in-law's eyes. The stranger my daughter had become. I went to the guest bedroom, the one that used to be Rebecca's, and sat on the edge of the bed, surrounded by her abandoned childhood, the debate trophies, the horseback riding ribbons, the poster of a boy band whose name I could no longer remember, and I cried. For the first time since Robert died, I truly broke down. Great, heaving sobs that left me gasping. I cried for my husband who wasn't here to protect me. I cried for the daughter I had apparently lost without realizing it. I cried for myself, an old woman alone, facing the one thing I never expected, betrayal from the person I loved most in the world. What I didn't know then was that Robert had seen it coming, had prepared for it in ways I couldn't have imagined. The lawyer's letter was already on its way. The next morning, Rebecca returned without Marcus. Her face was composed into an expression of patient concern that didn't reach her eyes. She brought coffee from the expensive shop in town and set it on the kitchen counter as a peace offering. "I'm sorry about yesterday, Mom," she said, her voice gentle in that way people use with difficult children or senile elders. "We all got emotional, but I've been talking with Marcus, and we really think this is the best solution for everyone." She proceeded to lay out their plan as if it were a gift I should be grateful for. I would sign over the house to them. They would sell it and purchase a one-bedroom condominium in a 55-plus community 20 minutes from their home. The remaining proceeds, likely over $1 million after the condo purchase, would be placed in a trust they would manage for my care and expenses. "This way, you don't have to worry about home maintenance or bills or investments," Rebecca explained, stirring artificial sweetener into her latte. "Everything will be taken care of. You can just enjoy your golden years." The condescension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I had managed our household finances for 43 years of marriage. I had helped put Rebecca through Brown University without a single student loan. I had nursed my husband through terminal cancer, while simultaneously handling insurance claims and medical billing that would have overwhelmed most professional accountants. But now, suddenly, I was incapable of managing a checkbook. "What about my volunteer work at the library?" I asked. "And the community kitchen? And my book club and garden society?" Rebecca waved a manicured hand dismissively. "I'm sure there are activities at the senior center, and we can find you new volunteer opportunities closer to us. Closer to us, not closer to me." The distinction was telling. "And what about my friends? My neighbors?" I pressed. "Mom, be realistic. How often do you actually see them? Frank next door is what, 80? And Marjorie is talking about moving to her daughter's place in Arizona. Your social circle is shrinking naturally. It happens at your age. At your age." Another knife twist. I took a sip of the coffee she'd brought. Too sweet, too milky. Not how I like it at all, though she should know after 67 years, and studied my daughter's face. When had this happened? When had the little girl who once crawled into my lap for comfort after nightmares become this stranger calculating the value of my life like an accountant preparing for an audit? "I need to think about it," I said again. Rebecca's pleasant mask slipped slightly. "There's really nothing to think about, Mom. Marcus has already spoken with a realtor. We could list the house next week." The presumption stole my breath away. "Without my permission, Rebecca, this is my home. Your father and Dad would want you taken care of," she interrupted. "And that's all we're trying to do." I set down my barely touched coffee. "I think I'd like you to leave now. Mom, you're being difficult. This isn't healthy. Nevertheless, it's my house, and I'm asking you to go." Rebecca stood, gathering her designer purse, the one I knew cost more than 3 months of my Social Security checks. "Fine, but we're going to have to resolve this soon. Marcus says the market is perfect for selling right now, and we don't want to miss the opportunity. We, as if the house were already theirs." As she reached the door, she turned back. "Oh, and Emma's private school tuition is due next month. The increase this year is ridiculous, but what can you do? It's the best school in Connecticut." The implication hung in the air, unspoken, but clear. My grandchildren's education, their future, their opportunities, all contingent on the liquidation of my home. A subtle emotional blackmail. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, looking at the familiar view of my backyard. The old oak tree Robert had hung a tire swing from when Rebecca was 5. The garden beds where we'd grown tomatoes and zucchini every summer. The bird bath where generations of robins and sparrows had visited. Was this really happening? Was I actually being pushed out of my own home by my own child? I picked up the phone to call my oldest friend, Margaret, who had moved to a retirement community in Vermont last year to be near her son. We'd kept in touch weekly by phone, but I hadn't mentioned Rebecca's increasing pressure about the house. "Oh, Ellie," Margaret sighed after I explained the situation. "I hate to say it, but you're not the first. My bridge partner here, Dorothy, her son did something similar. Got her to sign over her house in Westport, promising a condo nearby. Know where she ended up? In the assisted living wing here, while he pocketed the difference and bought a vacation home in the Bahamas." My stomach clenched. Rebecca wouldn't do that. Margaret's silence spoke volumes. "Have you talked to a lawyer?" she finally asked. "I don't know any lawyers except Marcus," I admitted. "And obviously, he's not an option." "Well, you need to find one, honey. Today. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And check your accounts. Make sure Rebecca doesn't have access." After we hung up, I did just that. Logged into the online banking Robert had insisted we set up before he died. Everything seemed in order. My checking account, the modest savings, the remaining investment portfolio. But when I tried to access the safe deposit box information, where we kept our important documents, including the house deed, the system asked for a password I didn't recognize. I called the bank immediately. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell," the manager said, after verifying my identity. "It appears your daughter, Rebecca Harrington, was added as a joint holder on the safe deposit box 2 years ago. She accessed it last week. 2 years ago, when I was still deep in grief over Robert. When Rebecca had helped me with paperwork, had I signed something without reading it carefully? Had I been too trusting? What did she take?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "We don't inventory the contents, ma'am. I can only tell you that she accessed it." I thanked him and hung up, my hands trembling worse than they had in years. Not from age, not from arthritis, from fear, because now I understood. This wasn't a sudden decision. This wasn't concern for my welfare. This was a planned, calculated move that had been in motion for years. My daughter, my only child, had been systematically positioning herself to take everything I had, and I had been blind to it, willfully perhaps, because who wants to believe such a thing of their own child? The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. A courier, holding a certified letter requiring my signature. "Are you Eleanor Mitchell?" he asked. I nodded, signed his electronic pad, and took the envelope. The return address was unfamiliar. Blackwell, Chen and Associates, attorneys at law. I didn't know then that this letter would be my salvation. Didn't know that Robert, my brilliant, foresightful Robert, had seen this coming long before I had. Didn't know that he had left me one final gift, protection from the daughter we had both loved, but only one of us had truly known. I held the unopened legal envelope in my trembling hands and found myself transported back to 1975. Robert and I had just moved into our first apartment in Boston, a 5th-floor walk-up with unreliable heat, but huge windows that filled the rooms with morning light. We had exactly 4 plates, 3 forks, and a collection of mismatched glasses. Our bed was a mattress on the floor. Our coffee table was a wooden cable spool Robert had rescued from a construction site and sanded smooth. We were gloriously, deliriously happy. Robert had just started at the law firm as a junior associate. I was teaching 3rd grade at an elementary school in a tough neighborhood. Our combined income barely covered rent and student loans, but somehow, we managed to save $5 each week in a cookie jar labeled Future. I remember one winter night when the heat went out again. We huddled under every blanket we owned, wearing hats and gloves indoors, laughing at the absurdity of it all. Robert's breath made little clouds in the freezing air as he whispered his dreams to me. Partnership at the firm someday, a house in the suburbs, children playing in a yard with actual grass instead of the cracked concrete outside our apartment. "We'll have a big oak table," he promised, rubbing my cold hands between his, the kind that fits 12 people for Thanksgiving dinner, and we'll fill it with friends and family and children. So many children, Ellie. In the end, we had only Rebecca. 3 miscarriages followed her birth, each one a private agony we shouldered together. After the last one, when I was 37, the doctor advised against trying again. Robert never once made me feel like I had failed him, though I knew he had dreamed of a house full of children. "We have Rebecca," he would say, kissing my forehead. "She's perfect. She's enough. And she was perfect to us. A bright, precocious child with Robert's analytical mind and my artistic sensibility. She played violin, not particularly well, but with great enthusiasm. She excelled academically without seeming to try very hard. She had a small circle of loyal friends who spent countless weekends at our house, drawn perhaps by Robert's famous chocolate chip pancakes on Sunday mornings. By then, we had the house on Sycamore Lane. Robert had made junior partner, then full partner. I had left teaching when Rebecca was born, but returned part-time when she started kindergarten. We weren't wealthy by Connecticut standards, but we were comfortable, stable, secure. We saved diligently for Rebecca's education. No small feat with private college tuitions rising astronomically each year. We drove modest cars a little longer than our neighbors. We took one nice vacation annually, instead of the multiple trips many of Robert's colleagues enjoyed. Everything was focused on providing opportunities for Rebecca, and she seemed to appreciate it in her way. She was a generally good teenager. No major rebellion, no trouble with authorities. She studied hard, earned excellent grades, participated in the right extracurricular activities. When she was accepted to Brown University with a partial merit scholarship, it felt like validation of every sacrifice we'd made. I remember the day we drove her to campus, the car packed to bursting with dorm supplies, Rebecca's violin carefully wedged between suitcases. She was nervous but trying not to show it. Robert kept making terrible dad jokes to lighten the mood. I had packed a lunch, her favorite sandwiches, homemade cookies, fruit cut just the way she liked it, because I couldn't bear the thought of her first meal at college being from some impersonal cafeteria. When it was time for us to leave, Rebecca hugged me tightly, something she rarely did as a teenager. "Thanks, Mom," she whispered, "for everything." I cried the entire 3-hour drive home. Robert held my hand across the console, steady as always, though I saw him wipe away his own tears once when he thought I wasn't looking. "She'll be back," he promised. "For holidays, for summers. She'll always need us, Ellie, just in different ways." He was right, of course. She did come back, but each return brought subtle changes. New friends with familiar last names and trust funds. New tastes in clothing, music, activities. New opinions about our quaint lifestyle in provincial town. By her junior year, she was spending holidays with roommates in Aspen or the Hamptons instead of coming home. That summer, she accepted an internship in New York City instead of returning to Connecticut. We helped her find an apartment in a neighborhood we could barely afford, grateful for the few weekends she made the short train ride to visit. It was during one of those weekends that she brought Marcus home for the first time. Tall, conventionally handsome, impeccably dressed, with credentials that impressed even Robert. Harvard undergrad, Yale Law School, junior associate at a prestigious Manhattan firm. "Quite a catch," Robert murmured to me that night after they'd gone to sleep in separate rooms. My one non-negotiable rule under my roof, despite Rebecca's eye-rolling. Something about Marcus had set off warning bells for me, though I couldn't articulate why. Perhaps it was the way his eyes assessed our home, not admiring, but appraising. Perhaps it was his carefully modulated politeness, never a hair out of place. Perhaps it was the way Rebecca seemed slightly different around him, more careful with her words, more conscious of his reactions. But they were both adults, and he made my daughter happy, or seemed to. Who was I to question her choice? The proposal came a year later. The ring was ostentatious, a diamond so large it looked uncomfortable on Rebecca's slender hand. The wedding planning quickly spiraled beyond anything Robert and I had envisioned. "Honey, this is beyond our budget," I tried to explain gently when Rebecca showed me the quote from her preferred venue, a historic estate that charged more for a single day than our mortgage payment for 6 months. "Marcus's parents are contributing," she replied dismissively. "And anyway, Dad can use his retirement savings if necessary. It's not like you guys travel or anything." The casual entitlement stunned me into silence. When had our sensible, grateful daughter turned into this stranger? But Robert, wanting his only child to have the wedding of her dreams, dipped into his retirement fund. We sold some investments. We put a modest amount on credit cards, telling ourselves it was a once-in-a-lifetime expense. The wedding was beautiful, if impersonal, more like a society event than a family celebration. Marcus's parents, the Harringtons, were cordial but distant. Old money that viewed our professional success as quaint, admirable in the way one might admire a child's finger painting, with condescension masked as encouragement. At the reception, while Rebecca danced with Robert to "The Way You Look Tonight," I overheard Mrs. Harrington speaking to another guest. "The Mitchells seem like lovely people," she said, voice lowered but not enough. "Self-made, you know. He's done quite well for someone from his background. And she was a teacher, I believe, at a public school." The way she said "public school," as if describing an exotic, slightly dangerous occupation, made my cheeks burn. But I smiled and pretended not to hear, because this was Rebecca's day, and nothing was going to spoil it. After the wedding, visits became even more infrequent. Phone calls shorter. Rebecca and Marcus bought their colonial in the exclusive part of town, with considerable help from his parents, I later learned, and began creating a life that seemed to have little room for Robert and me. Then came the grandchildren. Emma first, a solemn little girl with Rebecca's eyes and Marcus's reserve. Then Jacob, more boisterous but quickly shaped by his father's expectations. I longed to be the kind of grandmother who babysit regularly, who had special baking days and taught them to garden. Instead, I saw them on carefully scheduled visits, always under Rebecca's watchful eye, always with the unspoken expectation that I wouldn't contradict the rigid parenting rules the Harringtons endorsed. Still, I treasured those moments, stored them up like jewels to take out and examine during the increasingly quiet days at home. The time Emma fell asleep against my shoulder while I read her "Goodnight Moon." The afternoon Jacob and I spent building a fort from sofa cushions while Rebecca was at a charity luncheon. The Christmas morning when they burst into our bedroom at dawn, too excited about Santa's visit to remember their usual perfect manners. Robert's illness changed everything again. Rebecca seemed genuinely distraught at the diagnosis, but increasingly absent as his condition worsened. The grandchildren were kept away for their own good, though I suspected it had more to do with Marcus's discomfort around illness than any concern for the children's emotional welfare. During those 18 months of Robert's illness, I discovered reserves of strength I never knew I possessed. I learned medical terminology, argued with insurance companies, researched experimental treatments, all while watching my beloved husband slowly slip away. The night before he died, during a rare moment of clarity amid the morphine haze, Robert asked me to help him sit up. "Need to tell you something," he said, his once robust voice reduced to a raspy whisper. I leaned close, my ear nearly touching his lips. "Rebecca," he managed. "Be careful. Marcus, the money." "Shh," I soothed, thinking he was confused. "Don't worry about anything. Just rest." He gripped my hand with surprising strength. "No, listen. I've made arrangements. Chen knows. Letter will come." I assumed it was the medication talking. Robert had been having mild hallucinations for days. Conversations with his long-dead parents. Visions of places we'd visited decades ago. I stroked his thin hair and promised everything would be all right. He died the next morning. As the cardinal landed on the windowsill, I was holding his hand. Rebecca arrived 40 minutes later, already on the phone with the funeral home her in-laws recommended. Now, 3 years later, sitting in the kitchen with a certified letter from Blackwell, Chen & Associates, I remembered Robert's cryptic words. "Chen, letter will come." With hands still shaking, I opened the envelope. The letter remained unread on my kitchen table for 2 days. Some irrational part of me feared that opening it would somehow make Robert more gone, would sever one of the last connections I had to him. Another part feared what it might contain. Had he known somehow that our daughter would turn on me? Had he seen something in Rebecca that I, blinded by maternal love, had missed? I might have let it sit even longer, but the phone call I received that morning changed everything. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Dr. Harrison's office calling to confirm your appointment for cognitive assessment next Tuesday at 10 a.m. I frowned in confusion. "I don't have an appointment with Dr. Harrison. I've never heard of Dr. Harrison." The receptionist paused. "Oh, I see. The appointment was made by Rebecca Harrington? She indicated she's your daughter and healthcare proxy?" The room seemed to tilt slightly. "She is my daughter, but she is not my healthcare proxy, and I have not authorized any cognitive assessment." "I'm sorry for the confusion," the woman said, sounding genuinely apologetic. "It says here that she's concerned about early signs of dementia and wanted a professional evaluation before—" "Oh, before what?" I pressed, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. "It just says, before proceeding with next steps. Would you like me to cancel the appointment?" "Yes, please. And I'd like you to note in my file, which apparently exists despite me never having been your patient, that Rebecca Harrington is not authorized to make appointments for me or access my medical information. After hanging up, I sat down hard in the kitchen chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. The implications were staggering. Rebecca wasn't just trying to get my house, she was laying groundwork to have me declared incompetent, to take legal control over me as well as my assets. With trembling fingers, I finally tore open Robert's letter. Dear Eleanor, it began in formal legal language that gradually softened into my husband's voice. If you're reading this, I am gone, and something has happened to make Attorney Chen feel it necessary to contact you. I pray I'm wrong about what that something might be, but I've seen the way Marcus looks at our house, our savings, our lives. More disturbingly, I've seen Rebecca beginning to look at things the same way. You've always seen the best in people, my love. It's one of the countless reasons I adore you, but sometimes you don't see the worst until it's too late. I fear Rebecca has changed in ways we never anticipated. The influence of Marcus and his family, their values and expectations, have shaped her into someone I sometimes barely recognize. So, I've taken steps to protect you. Steps I hope you'll never need, but that will be there if you do. The letter went on to explain that Robert had created a secret trust 2 years before his diagnosis. He had quietly liquidated certain investments and placed them, along with a substantial life insurance policy I knew nothing about, into this trust with me as the sole beneficiary. The trust was structured in a way that made it virtually impossible for Rebecca or Marcus to access or control. Furthermore, he had restructured our wills and property ownership. While I had assumed we owned our home jointly, the normal arrangement for married couples, Robert had actually placed it solely in my name years ago. The deed, the letter explained, was not in our safety deposit box as I believed, but in Attorney Chen's secure files. I've also documented a pattern of concerning behavior from Rebecca and Marcus, the letter continued. Their questions about our finances, their pressure about estate planning, their subtle attempts to isolate you from decision-making. Attorney Chen has all of this information. If you're reading this letter, it means you need this protection now. Call Daniel Chen immediately. His number is at the bottom of this page. Tell him Cardinal at the window. He'll understand and set everything in motion. I'm so sorry, my darling. Sorry I'm not there to shield you from this. Sorry our daughter has become someone we must guard against rather than lean on. Sorry for keeping these arrangements from you. I know you hate secrets between us, but I couldn't bear to tell you my suspicions about our only child while I was still here to see the pain in your eyes. Remember that I love you, that I've loved you since that first day in Professor Abernathy's English literature class, when you argued so passionately for Jane Eyre's independence that you made the old man blush. You are stronger than you know. You will survive this too. All my love. Always, Robert. I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words, before picking up the phone to call Attorney Chen. What I didn't expect was for Rebecca to arrive during that call. She used her key, the one I'd given her for emergencies years ago, and walked in without knocking, accompanied by an older man with a leather briefcase. "Mom," she said with exaggerated patience, as if speaking to a child, "this is Dr. Levinson. He's a geriatric specialist who works with families like ours. He's just going to ask you a few questions." I covered the phone receiver with my hand. "I'm in the middle of an important call. You need to leave." Rebecca's face hardened. "Who are you talking to?" "That's none of your business." She stepped forward and tried to take the phone from my hand. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. Let me help you." I pulled away, but not before she glimpsed the letterhead on the paper beside me. "Blackwell and Chen?" she read, her voice rising. "Why are you talking to a lawyer? What are you doing?" "Mrs. Harrington," the man with her interjected smoothly, "perhaps this isn't the best time. Your mother seems agitated." "She's confused," Rebecca insisted. "She doesn't understand what's happening. That's why we need your assessment." I stood up straight, holding the phone and letter to my chest. "I understand perfectly what's happening, Rebecca. You're trying to have me declared incompetent so you can take my house and my money. You made an unauthorized medical appointment for a cognitive assessment. You're bringing strange doctors into my home without permission. You accessed my safety deposit box without my knowledge." Rebecca's face went through a remarkable transformation. Shock, guilt, calculation, and finally, a cold anger that made her look suddenly, disturbingly, like Marcus. "We're trying to help you," she hissed. You're obviously not capable of making rational decisions anymore. Living alone in this big house, refusing reasonable offers, now apparently calling random lawyers. Not random, I said quietly. Your father's lawyer. Something flashed in her eyes. Fear, perhaps. Dad's been dead for 3 years, and his firm doesn't even exist anymore. Daniel Chen was his personal attorney, not part of the firm, and apparently he left some arrangements with him. Arrangements concerning you. Rebecca stepped back as if I'd slapped her. What are you talking about? What arrangements? In that moment, looking at my daughter's face, the face I had once kissed goodnight thousands of times, the face that had once looked to me for comfort, approval, love, I felt a pain so deep, it seemed to crack my very foundation. This person who shared my blood, whom I had carried inside my body, had become a stranger. Worse than a stranger, an enemy. Get out of my house, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. Take your doctor with you. Don't come back without an invitation, and don't expect one anytime soon. Mom, now, Rebecca, or I will call the police and report you for attempting to commit elder abuse and fraud. Dr. Levinson, looking increasingly uncomfortable, touched Rebecca's arm. Perhaps we should reschedule. Rebecca snatched up her purse. Fine, but this isn't over. You clearly need help whether you'll admit it or not. We'll do this officially if we have to. As they left, Rebecca turned in the doorway, her face twisted with an ugly combination of rage and calculation. You know what's sad, Mom? Dad would be so disappointed in you right now. So hurt by how you're treating your only family, the only people who care if you live or die. The door slammed behind her, the sound echoing through the empty house. I raised the phone back to my ear with a hand that wouldn't stop trembling. Mr. Chen? I said, my voice cracking. Cardinal at the window. I need your help. Daniel Chen arrived at my home 2 hours later. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses and an air of quiet competence that reminded me painfully of Robert. Your husband was one of the finest men I've ever known, he said after introducing himself and settling at my kitchen table. He spoke of you constantly, with such pride and love. I pushed a cup of tea toward him, grateful to have something to do with my hands. I had no idea Robert had made these arrangements. No idea he suspected what Rebecca might do. Chen nodded solemnly. Robert was an excellent attorney before he was a partner at that fancy firm. He noticed details, patterns, and he was concerned about certain conversations he had with your son-in-law, certain questions Marcus asked that seemed calculated. Why didn't he tell me? I asked, the hurt of this final secret between us still fresh. He wanted to protect you from the pain of seeing your daughter that way, Chen said gently. And honestly, he hoped he was wrong, that the trust and other arrangements would prove unnecessary. He opened his briefcase and removed several folders. But he made me promise that if certain triggers occurred after his death, unauthorized access to accounts, pressure to sell assets, attempts to isolate you or control your finances, I would contact you immediately. The safety deposit box, I murmured. That was one of the triggers? Yes. We've had a monitoring system in place. When Rebecca accessed it last week, it sent an automatic alert to my office. For the next 3 hours, Chen walked me through Robert's arrangements with meticulous care. The trust held over $1.5 million, money I never knew we had, apparently squirreled away gradually over decades and then placed in high-yield investments. The house was indeed solely in my name, with the deed secured in Chen's office safe. Robert had even set up a separate checking account in my name only, with a healthy balance, the details of which were in one of the folders Chen provided. But there's more, Chen said, reaching deeper into his briefcase. Robert knew that legal protection might not be enough, that emotional manipulation could be just as dangerous. He withdrew a sealed envelope with my name written in Robert's familiar handwriting. Unlike the formal letter I'd already received, this was personal stationery, the kind Robert used for birthday cards and anniversary notes. He asked me to give you this if things reached this point. It's for your eyes only. I took it with trembling hands, but didn't open it yet. What do we do now? Chen's expression turned resolute. Now we make it absolutely clear to Rebecca and Marcus that their plans won't succeed. I've prepared a formal cease and desist letter detailing what we know about their attempts to gain control of your assets and person. It warns of legal consequences if they persist. Will that stop them? It should. People like Marcus don't like exposure. They operate best in shadows. But if not, he patted one of the folders. We have documentation of everything. Their unauthorized access to your accounts, the improper medical appointments, the pressure tactics. We can file for a restraining order if necessary." After Chen left, with plans to deliver the cease and desist letter to Rebecca and Marcus the following day, I sat alone in my living room with Robert's personal letter in my lap. Outside, evening was settling over the neighborhood. Through the window, I could see Frank next door watering his tomato plants. A mother and child rode bikes along the sidewalk, the little one still using training wheels, life continuing its normal rhythms while mine had been upended. Finally, I opened the envelope. "My dearest Ellie," Robert had written in his distinctive, slightly slanted script. "If you're reading this, then my worst fears about our daughter have come true, and I am so deeply sorry for that pain. There is nothing more bitter than being wounded by someone you love with your whole heart. I want you to know that this is not your fault. You were a magnificent mother, patient, loving, supportive, wise. You gave Rebecca every advantage, every opportunity, every ounce of your boundless love. The path she has chosen reflects her own character and choices, not any failure of your parenting. I've lain awake many nights trying to understand when and how we lost her. Was it the influence of Marcus and his family? The allure of wealth and status? Some seed of discontent or entitlement we failed to recognize? I don't know. Perhaps it doesn't matter now. What matters is you, my love, your well-being, your future, your happiness. I've done everything in my power to ensure your financial security, but I worry about your heart. I worry you'll blame yourself, or worse, allow Rebecca's betrayal to diminish your capacity for joy. Please don't. You deserve every happiness this world has to offer. You deserve friendship and community and purpose. You deserve mornings watching cardinals at the feeder and evenings with good books by the fire. You deserve peace. I used to think that family was defined by blood, that the love between parent and child was inviolable, sacred. I now believe that family is defined by love itself, by choice and commitment and mutual care. Rebecca may have removed herself from that sacred circle, but that doesn't mean you are without family. Your friends, Margaret and Marjorie and Frank and all the others who treasure you as I do, the people whose lives you touch through your volunteer work, the community that knows your kindness and generosity, these are your family now. And of course I am still with you, not in the way either of us would choose, but in every cardinal that visits your garden, in every passage of the books we love together, in the muscle memory of your hands when you make my favorite recipes, in the thousands of days and nights we shared. Be brave, my Ellie. Be fierce in your own defense. Know your worth, which is beyond measure, and when the initial shock and pain of this betrayal begin to fade, choose joy again. It would honor me beyond words to know that you found happiness, even after this heartbreak, even after me. I have loved you since the moment you walked into that classroom 46 years ago. I will love you beyond the boundary of death, and I believe with complete conviction that you have the strength to rise from this like a phoenix, not just surviving, but soaring. Forever yours, Robert. I clutched the letter to my chest and wept, not the broken, despairing tears of the past few days, but cleansing tears that somehow contained both grief and determination. In my mind's eye, I could see Robert so clearly, his gentle smile, his steady presence, his unwavering belief in me. He had seen this coming, had prepared not just legally, but emotionally, had reached across time and death itself to offer me one final gift: permission to defend myself, permission to rebuild, permission to find joy again. As darkness fell completely, I switched on the lamp beside me. Its warm glow pushed back the shadows, much as Robert's letter had pushed back my despair. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of something like hope, something like strength. My husband had faith in me, had always had faith in me, and I would not let him down. I smoothed the letter carefully, reverently, and then placed it in the drawer of the side table where I kept my most treasured possessions. Tomorrow would bring Chen's confrontation with Rebecca and Marcus, would bring more pain, more difficult conversations, perhaps more loss. But tonight I had found something I thought I'd lost forever: my voice, my courage, my sense of self-worth. Rebecca had declared me not family anymore. She didn't realize that in doing so, she had inadvertently set me free from manipulation, free from false obligation, free to defend myself without the paralyzing fear of hurting my child, because she had already made her choice, had already severed that sacred bond. I was Eleanor Mitchell. I had survived losing the love of my life. I had built a meaningful life in the aftermath of devastating grief. I had friends and purpose, and a home I loved, and I would not be moved. The following morning, I woke with purpose humming through me like electricity. For 3 years, I had been moving through life as if underwater. Everything muffled, slowed, distant. Grief had become a comfortable companion, predictable in its weight. But now, a different energy propelled me. Not happiness exactly, but clarity, determination, a fierce desire to reclaim my life and dignity. I showered and dressed with unusual care, not in my typical comfortable slacks and sweater, but in a tailored navy suit I hadn't worn since Robert's funeral. I applied makeup, styled my hair, put on the pearl earrings Robert had given me for our 40th anniversary. Armor of a sort. Attorney Chen had suggested I not be present when he delivered the cease and desist letter to Rebecca and Marcus. These confrontations can get ugly, he'd warned. Let me handle this part. But I had no intention of hiding in my home while others fought my battles. I called Chen and informed him I would be accompanying him. After some protest, he agreed to pick me up at 10. While waiting, I did something I'd been avoiding for years. I went into Robert's home office. After his death, I'd closed the door and largely left it untouched, finding it too painful to sort through his professional life. Now, I needed to understand exactly what I was fighting for and against. The room smelled faintly of Robert's aftershave, as if molecules of it had been permanently absorbed into the leather of his chair, the wood of his desk. I ran my fingers over his law books, the framed diplomas, the family photos arranged precisely on the credenza. Then I sat at his desk and began methodically going through the drawers. In the bottom right drawer, beneath a stack of legal pads, I found a leather portfolio I didn't recognize. Inside were dozens of pages of handwritten notes, all in Robert's distinctive script. Notes about conversations with Marcus. Questions Marcus had asked about our finances, our property, our investments. Comments he had made about our retirement planning, our will, our estate, all meticulously dated and documented. March 15, 2018. One entry read, "Dinner at Rebecca and Marcus's home. After Rebecca took Ellie to see the new landscaping, Marcus asked detailed questions about the terms of our life insurance policies. Wanted to know if they had contestability clauses. Seemed disappointed when I mentioned the primary beneficiary is Ellie, with Rebecca as secondary only." June 27, 2018. Marcus called office directly rather than home. Inquired about property deed to Sycamore Lane House. Asked if it was jointly held, and what happens in the event of incapacitation of one owner. Claimed it was related to a case he's working on. Checked with his firm later. He has no cases involving property law currently. The entries continued, page after page, year after year. Small moments, seemingly innocuous questions, subtle suggestions, each individually unremarkable, but together forming a pattern of calculation and intent that sent chills down my spine. The final entry was dated just a week before Robert's diagnosis. Meeting with Daniel Chen completed. All arrangements in place. Pray we never need them, but I will not leave Ellie unprotected. Marcus's interest in our finances has increased as my health has declined. Heartburn and fatigue, the doctor says, is likely nothing, but that has prompted these precautions. Rebecca seems blind to his maneuvering, or perhaps complicit. Cannot bear to believe the latter. I closed the portfolio with hands that had steadied. So this was how Robert had known. Not through some mysterious intuition, but through careful observation and documentation. The lawyer in him had noticed what the father had not wanted to see. The doorbell rang precisely at 10. Attorney Chen stood on my porch, briefcase in hand, surprise evident on his face when he saw my formal attire. "Mrs. Mitchell, are you certain about this? It could get confrontational." "I'm counting on it," I replied, locking my door behind me. "And please, call me Eleanor." The drive to Rebecca and Marcus's Colonial took less than 15 minutes. Neither of their cars was in the circular driveway. "They're expecting me at 10:30, Chen explained as we parked. "I didn't tell them you'd be coming." "Good," I said. "The element of surprise works in our favor." At precisely 10:30, a sleek black Audi pulled into the driveway. Marcus emerged first, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my pension. Rebecca followed, dressed for what appeared to be a charity luncheon in a designer dress and pearls that made mine look modest by comparison. Their synchronized expressions of shock when they saw me standing beside Attorney Chen would have been comical under other circumstances. "Mom?" Rebecca recovered first. "What are you doing here? And who is this?" Chen stepped forward, extending a business card. "Daniel Chen, attorney at law. I represent Eleanor Mitchell. Is there somewhere private we can talk?" Marcus took the card, his face unreadable. "Of course. Please come inside." He led us to his home office, a room designed to impress with its mahogany shelves, leather furniture, and framed law degrees displayed prominently. I had always found it coldly impersonal, lacking the warmth and lived-in feel of Robert's workspace. "What exactly is this regarding?" Marcus asked once we were seated, his tone professionally detached. Chen opened his briefcase. "I'll be direct. I'm here to address the concerning pattern of behavior you both have exhibited toward my client, including, but not limited to, attempts to gain control of her assets through coercion, unauthorized access to her financial information, and what appears to be the beginnings of an unfounded competency challenge." Rebecca's face flushed. "That's ridiculous. We're trying to help my mother make sensible decisions about her future. She's been declining since Dad died." "I'm in perfect health, Rebecca," I interrupted calmly, "as my recent physical with Dr. Matthews confirms, documentation of which Attorney Chen has in his files." Marcus leaned forward, his expression shifting to what I recognized as his courtroom face. "With all due respect, Mr. Chen, family concerns about an elderly parent's well-being are hardly a legal matter. When those concerns involve attempting to seize control of assets worth millions of dollars, they become very much a legal matter," Chen replied, removing documents from his briefcase. "As do unauthorized access to safety deposit boxes, attempting to arrange medical evaluations without consent, and making false claims about possessing healthcare proxy status." He slid the cease and desist letter across the desk. "This formally documents these actions and warns of legal consequences should they continue." Marcus didn't touch the document. "These are serious allegations, with substantial evidence behind them," Chen confirmed, "as well as contemporaneous documentation by Robert Mitchell before his death regarding his concerns about your intentions toward his wife and estate." That hit home. Marcus's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing shock and something like fear. "Robert left documentation?" "Extensive documentation," I said, speaking directly to my son-in-law for the first time. "Every conversation, every question, every time you expressed interest in our finances, our property, our investments. He saw through you, Marcus. Long before I did." Rebecca stood suddenly, her composure cracking. "This is absurd. We're trying to help you. That house is too big for you. You could fall. You could get hurt with no one around to help. You're being selfish and irrational." "I'm being independent," I corrected, "which is apparently threatening to you both." "Mom, you don't understand. We have plans. The house is mine," I finished for her, "solely in my name, as Robert arranged years ago." Anticipating exactly this scenario, Rebecca turned to Marcus, confusion replacing anger. "What is she talking about? You said the house was joint property, that we could—" She stopped abruptly, perhaps realizing what she was revealing. "That you could what, Rebecca?" I pressed. "Force me out? Sell it from under me? Use the proceeds for what? Emma's private school? A vacation home in the Berkshires? Your country club membership?" Marcus placed a restraining hand on Rebecca's arm. "I think we should continue this conversation with our attorney present." Chen nodded. "An excellent suggestion. In the meantime, this cease and desist remains in effect. Any further attempts to access Mrs. Mitchell's finances, property, or medical information without her explicit consent will result in immediate legal action. Additionally," I added, "I'll be changing the locks on my home today. Your key will no longer work, Rebecca, and you are both formally uninvited from my property unless you receive specific permission to visit." Rebecca's face crumpled. "You can't be serious. We're your family. Your only family." "No," I said, rising to my feet with a steadiness that surprised even me. "You made your position quite clear when you said I wasn't family anymore. I'm simply agreeing with your assessment and acting accordingly." As Chen and I moved toward the door, Marcus found his voice again. "This isn't over, Eleanor. If you're really of sound mind, you'd see we're trying to help you." I turned back one last time, looking at my daughter and the man she had chosen, both strangers to me now in all the ways that mattered. "Robert left me one other thing, besides legal protection," I said quietly. "A letter. In it, He reminded me that family is defined by love, by choice, by mutual care. By that definition, you're right. This isn't over. It's been over for some time. I just hadn't accepted it until now. In the car driving away, I expected to feel devastated, to collapse under the weight of finally, irrevocably acknowledging the loss of my daughter. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. The clarity of truth, however painful, was preferable to the fog of denial and manipulation I'd been living in. "You did well in there," Chen said as we drove. "Robert would be proud. He prepared me well," I replied, watching Rebecca's house recede in the side mirror, even from beyond. Back at home, I made 2 immediate calls, one to a locksmith for same-day service, another to my bank to completely revoke Rebecca's access to any of my accounts and set up additional security measures. Then I went back to Robert's office and opened the leather portfolio again. Between the pages of notes, I found something I'd missed earlier, a small envelope containing a key I didn't recognize, and a handwritten note. Safety deposit box, number 714, Connecticut First National. My final contingency. The evidence here is to be used only if all else fails. Let's pray it never comes to that. R. I stared at the key, turning it over in my fingers. What final protection had Robert put in place? What evidence could be so sensitive he kept it separate from everything else? I didn't know yet, but for the first time in years, I felt truly awake, alert, prepared. Robert had given me the tools to defend myself, but the strength to use them had been within me all along. Rebecca had declared war on the wrong woman. That night, for the first time since Robert died, I slept in the center of our bed rather than on my side, leaving his untouched as if he might still return to it. I spread my arms and legs wide, claiming the entire space, and slept more deeply than I had in years. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and a cardinal, bright red against the blue sky, was perched on the oak branch outside. I watched it for a long moment, allowing myself to imagine it was a sign from Robert, a message of approval. Over the next week, I methodically rebuilt the foundations of my life, this time with proper safeguards in place. The locks were changed. My phone number too. I set up a new email address that neither Rebecca nor Marcus knew. I met with my primary physician to ensure my medical records clearly stated my competency, and to document that Rebecca was not authorized to make medical decisions on my behalf. I called my old friend Margaret in Vermont again, this time sharing the full story of Robert's preparations and my confrontation with Rebecca and Marcus. "That's my girl," Margaret said, her voice warm with approval. "About time you showed those vultures your talons." "I don't know if I would go that far," I laughed, the sound unfamiliar but welcome. "I'm just protecting myself." "Same thing," Margaret insisted. "And what about this mysterious second safety deposit box? Have you checked it yet?" "Not yet," I admitted. "Part of me is afraid of what I'll find. Whatever it is, Robert meant it to help you. Don't wait too long, Ellie." She was right, of course. The next morning, I drove to Connecticut First National and presented my ID and the key. "Box my 713, I told the banker. "I believe it's in my husband's name, Robert Mitchell." She checked the records. "Actually, it's in both your names, Mrs. Mitchell. Joint access." A few minutes later, I sat alone in a small private room with the metal box before me. My hands trembled slightly as I turned the key and lifted the lid. Inside was a single USB drive and a sealed envelope with "View the contents first" written on it in Robert's handwriting. I took both home, knowing I needed privacy for whatever this was. In Robert's office, I plugged the USB into his computer and opened the sole folder it contained, labeled simply "Insurance." The folder held dozens of audio files, each named with a date. With growing unease, I clicked on the earliest one. Robert's voice filled the room, so clear and present that tears sprang to my eyes. October 12th, 2017. Lunch meeting with Marcus Harrington at the Capitol Grill, Hartford. Recording device in breast pocket. What followed was a conversation that started innocuously enough. Discussion of a legal case, sports talk, mundane office politics. But around the 15-minute mark, the tone shifted. "So, Robert," Marcus's voice, smooth as expensive whiskey. "Rebecca mentioned you've been having some health concerns. Nothing serious, I hope. Just routine tests," Robert replied. "Doctor says it's probably nothing. Still, makes you think, doesn't it? About planning. Arrangements. Everything's in order, Robert said. Has been for years. Of course. But these things need updating, especially with property values in your neighborhood increasing so dramatically. That house of yours must be worth, what, 1.5 now? Maybe 2 million in the right market? The conversation continued, with Marcus steering repeatedly back to questions about our finances, our will, our assets. Robert deflecting skillfully but capturing every probe, every suggestion. I listened to 3 more recordings, each more damning than the last. In one from early 2019, Marcus directly suggested that I might need assistance managing affairs after Robert's eventual passing. Eleanor's a capable woman, Robert had responded, a protective edge in his voice that made my heart clench. Always has been. Of course, Marcus backpedaled, but grief does strange things. And no offense, but financial management is complex at your level of assets. A younger person with legal training might be better positioned to help. A younger person, like himself. The final recording I played was dated just a month before Robert's diagnosis. This one included Rebecca's voice. "Dad, we've been thinking," she began, her tone artificially casual. "The house is really too big for just you and Mom, and the stairs could become dangerous as you get older." "We're managing fine," Robert replied mildly. "But wouldn't it make sense to downsize now? On your own terms? We could help you find something more suitable. Something single level, maybe in that new development near us." "And what would happen to the house?" Robert asked. Marcus jumped in smoothly. "The market's excellent right now. You could make a significant profit. We could help you invest it properly for your future care needs." "Our future care needs are already arranged for," Robert said. "But thank you for your concern." "Dad, you're being stubborn." Rebecca's voice had an edge to it. "You and Mom always lived so frugally. This is a chance to finally enjoy your retirement with a significant cushion." "We enjoy our retirement just fine," Robert replied, and I could hear the steel beneath his politeness. "And we live the way we choose to live." The conversation continued, growing increasingly tense as Rebecca and Marcus pushed harder, Robert resisting with the quiet firmness I knew so well. When it ended, I sat in stunned silence, staring at the computer screen. There were at least 20 more audio files I hadn't listened to yet. 20 more documented instances of my daughter and son-in-law circling our assets like sharks scenting blood, even before Robert was sick. With shaking hands, I finally opened the sealed envelope from the safety deposit box. "My dearest Ellie," Robert had written, "if you're accessing these recordings, then the situation with Rebecca and Marcus has escalated beyond what the initial legal protections could address. I'm so sorry for that, and even sorrier for the pain these recordings will cause you. Hearing our daughter speak this way will break your heart as it did mine." I began recording my conversations with Marcus after noticing a pattern to his questions about our finances. Initially, I thought I was being paranoid, but as you've now heard, my concerns were justified. Connecticut is a one-party consent state for recordings, making these legally obtained and admissible in court if ever needed. I never wanted you to have to use these. They are the nuclear option, Ellie. Exposure of these conversations would likely destroy any chance of reconciliation with Rebecca. They would certainly damage Marcus's professional reputation if made public. That's why I kept them separate from the other documentation, to be used only if absolutely necessary, only if they try to escalate beyond what the cease and desist and other legal measures can contain. The decision about whether to reveal the existence of these recordings is entirely yours. You know our daughter. You know whether she can be reasoned with, whether she might come to her senses without this level of confrontation. You know whether the relationship can be salvaged, and whether it should be. Whatever you decide, know that I support you. Know that I love you. Know that protecting your future was worth every difficult moment of obtaining this evidence. All my love, Robert. I set the letter down and moved to the window, looking out at the garden where spring was beginning to bring new life to plants that had seemed dead through the winter. They weren't dead, just dormant, waiting for the right conditions to thrive again. I wondered if the same might be true for my relationship with my daughter. Was there something worth salvaging beneath the greed and manipulation? Was there any path back to what we once had been to each other? I didn't know. But what I did know was that these recordings represented power. The power to protect myself completely, but also the power to potentially destroy any chance of reconciliation. As Robert had recognized, They were indeed the nuclear option. For now, I decided to keep their existence to myself, to wait and see how Rebecca and Marcus responded to the cease and desist letter and the clear legal boundaries Attorney Chen had established, to give my daughter one last chance to remember who she had been before money and status, and Marcus had warped her values beyond recognition. But I copied the files to a secure cloud account Chen had set up for me. Insurance, as Robert had labeled them, because while I might hope for reconciliation, I had finally learned to prepare for war. Over the next 2 weeks, I continued rebuilding my life and independence. I had lunch with Frank next door, who was delighted by my invitation and brought a bottle of wine that we finished together, laughing about neighborhood gossip. I rejoined my book club, which I had gradually stopped attending during Robert's illness and after his death. I increased my hours at the literacy program and community kitchen. Bit by bit, I reconstructed a life that was my own, not defined by grief or by my identity as Rebecca's mother, but by my own interests, my own community, my own choices. There was pain, yes. Moments when I would see a mother and adult daughter shopping together or sharing coffee at the cafe where I now went to read, and my heart would clench with loss. Times when I would pick up the phone to share some small news with Rebecca before remembering our estrangement. But beneath the pain was something else, a growing sense of freedom, freedom from manipulation, freedom from walking on eggshells, freedom from pretending not to notice the dismissive looks, the backhanded compliments, the subtle diminishment. Then, exactly 17 days after our confrontation in Marcus's office, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Rebecca standing alone on my porch, no sign of Marcus or his expensive car. She looked different somehow, less polished, more vulnerable. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of her usual perfect blowout. She wore jeans and a sweater rather than her designer clothes. For a moment, I hesitated, my hand on the newly installed deadbolt. Then I opened the door, but kept the security chain engaged. "Rebecca," I said, my voice neutral. "What do you want? Can I come in?" she asked. "Please, Mom. I just want to talk." I studied her face, searching for signs of the calculating woman who had tried to take my home, who had declared me not family anymore. What I saw instead was something I hadn't seen in years: uncertainty, vulnerability. Slowly, I closed the door, removed the chain, and opened it fully. "Come in," I said, "but understand this. I am not signing anything. I am not agreeing to anything. And if this is another attempt to pressure me, it will only strengthen my resolve." She nodded, stepping inside, her eyes darting around the familiar entryway, as if seeing it for the first time, or the last. "I came alone," she said unnecessarily. "Marcus doesn't know I'm here." I led her to the living room but remained standing, unwilling to settle into the false comfort of our previous patterns. "Say what you came to say, Rebecca." She took a deep breath, twisting her wedding ring nervously, a gesture so reminiscent of the anxious teenager she'd once been that it made my heart ache despite everything. "We received the letter from your lawyer," she began. "Marcus wants to fight it. He says we can still pursue guardianship, that we can prove you're being influenced or manipulated." "By whom?" I asked dryly. "The ghost of your father?" She flinched. "That's what I've been asking myself. Dad's been gone 3 years, but somehow he's still protecting you. Against us. Against me." Her voice broke slightly. "Why would he do that? What did we do that made him think that was necessary?" I considered my options carefully. I could tell her about the recordings, could play them right now, force her to confront the evidence of her and Marcus's calculated attempts to gain control of my assets. The nuclear option, as Robert had called it. Instead, I asked, "Why are you here, Rebecca?" "Really?" She looked up, tears now flowing freely down her face. "Because last night I found Emma going through my jewelry box. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was looking for things that might be valuable. Like what you and Daddy are doing with Grandma's house," she said. "She's 10 years old, Mom. 10. And she's already learned from us that it's okay to take things that don't belong to you if you think you deserve them." The words hung in the air between us, a damning indictment not just of Rebecca and Marcus's behavior toward me, but of what they were teaching their children, my grandchildren, about values, about family, about right and wrong. "I don't recognize myself anymore," Rebecca whispered. "I don't know when I became this person. When we bought the house, when we joined the country club, when Emma started at Westfield Academy. Somewhere along the way, it became normal to always want more, to feel entitled to more. I remained silent, not offering the easy absolution she might be seeking, but not closing the door on it either. Marcus is still determined to challenge you legally, she continued after a moment. He says your lawyer is bluffing, that we can still make a case for guardianship based on grief and age. And what do you say? I asked, my voice steady. Rebecca looked directly into my eyes for the first time since entering the house. I say I can't do it. I won't do it. Whatever we've become, whatever mistakes I've made, I can't be a part of trying to legally take away my mother's independence. I just can't. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a full reckoning with the betrayal, the hurt, the manipulation. But it was something, a step, a crack in the edifice of entitlement and greed that had consumed my daughter. Marcus won't be happy with that decision, I observed. No, she agreed. A flash of the old Rebecca, the strong-willed, principled young woman I'd raised, showing through. He won't, but it's not his decision to make. Not anymore. I wasn't naive enough to believe everything was fixed. One conversation couldn't undo years of calculated behavior. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be repaired without substantial evidence of change. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope that my daughter might find her way back, if not to what we had been to each other, then at least to the values that had once guided her. Would you like some tea? I offered, the first conciliatory gesture I'd been willing to extend. Rebecca nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand like she used to do as a child. I'd like that very much. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a beginning. As I moved toward the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of the garden through the window. The cardinal was back, perched on the oak branch, its bright red feathers vivid against the new green leaves. Thank you, Robert, I whispered silently, for everything. Spring bloomed fully into early summer, bringing with it gradual, tentative changes in my relationship with Rebecca. Our first tea that day had been awkward, conversation halting and superficial, but it led to another meeting the following week. Lunch at a neutral restaurant halfway between our homes, then another and another. We didn't discuss Marcus or the legal situation directly. Instead, we talked about safer subjects, the grandchildren, my volunteer work, books we'd read, small steps on uncertain ground. I remained cautious, protected by the legal safeguards Robert and Attorney Chen had put in place, not yet ready to fully trust again. Rebecca seemed different, more reflective, less materially focused. She mentioned arguments with Marcus, tensions at home. I didn't pry, sensing she needed to work through this journey in her own time, at her own pace. One Tuesday in June, she arrived for our lunch looking particularly tired, shadows under her eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Everything okay? I asked as we settled at our usual table. She pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, another gesture from her youth. Marcus has been meeting with lawyers, different ones, looking for ways around your protections. My stomach tightened. I see. I told him I won't be part of it, she continued, her voice stronger than I expected, that I've withdrawn my support. He didn't take it well. I imagine not. Rebecca met my eyes directly. He says I'm betraying him, that I'm choosing you over our family's future, that the house and money should be our inheritance, our security. I sipped my water, measuring my response. And what do you think? I think, she paused, seeming to search for words. I think Dad was right. About Marcus. About what we were becoming. About needing to protect you from us. Her voice cracked slightly. God, that's painful to admit. It was the closest she'd come to acknowledging the full reality of what had happened. Not quite an apology, but a recognition. Progress. I've told Marcus I want us to go to counseling, she continued. To rethink our values, our priorities. He refused. I nodded, unsurprised. Marcus had never struck me as a man capable of that level of self-reflection. Mom, there's something else you should know, Rebecca said, lowering her voice. Marcus has been looking into your finances, trying to find assets Dad might have hidden. He's become obsessed with it. A chill ran through me. Has he found anything? Not that I know of, but I wanted you to be aware, to be careful. I thanked her for the warning, our conversation shifting to lighter topics. But as we parted with our now customary awkward hug, I knew I needed to contact Attorney Chen immediately. Back home, I called him from my new secure line. We need to be prepared for Marcus to escalate, I explained after sharing Rebecca's warning. He sounds desperate, The legal protections are solid, Chen assured me. But given this new information, I recommend we take additional precautions. Perhaps a formal restraining order. A sharp knock at my front door interrupted him. Through the sidelight window, I could see Marcus standing on my porch, his expression thunderous. "He's here," I told Chen, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Marcus is at my door right now. Do not let him in," Chen said firmly. "I'm calling the police and coming over immediately. Do not engage with him, Eleanor." The knocking became pounding. "Eleanor, I know you're in there. Open the door. We need to talk." "I'll stay on the line," Chen promised. "Just don't open the door." But something in me, perhaps Robert's influence, perhaps my own rediscovered strength, rebelled against hiding in fear in my own home. "I'll call you back," I told Chen, and despite his protests, hung up. I approached the door but didn't open it. Instead, I spoke through it, my voice carrying clearly. "Go away, Marcus. I have nothing to say to you. This has gone far enough," he shouted. "You've turned my wife against me, poisoned her mind, destroyed my family. I've done nothing of the sort," I replied calmly. "Rebecca is making her own decisions, as am I. We had a plan." His voice cracked with emotion I hadn't believed him capable of. "Everything was arranged. The house sale, the trust, our future, your future at my expense," I corrected. "Now leave, or I'm calling the police." "You think you've won," he hissed, his voice lower now, but still audible through the door. "You think Robert outsmarted me from beyond the grave. But there are ways around his precious trust. There are always ways if you know the law well enough." I felt a surge of anger, not the helpless, confused anger I'd felt when this all began, but something clearer and more righteous. This isn't about winning, Marcus. It's about justice, about autonomy, about respect, concepts you seem to have trouble grasping. "Don't lecture me, you sanctimonious." He cut himself off, but I could practically hear him struggling for control. "Open the door. Let's discuss this like adults." "There's nothing to discuss. My decisions about my home and finances are final. And if you continue harassing me, the restraining order my attorney is currently preparing will become reality." That seemed to reach him. His voice changed, becoming the smooth, reasonable tone I recognized from years of family gatherings. "Eleanor, be reasonable. Think of the grandchildren. Think of their education, their opportunities. All we're asking is for you to help secure their future. By giving up my present, my independence, my home." I shook my head, though he couldn't see it. "The grandchildren will be fine, Marcus. And they'll learn an important lesson about dignity and boundaries in the process." A car pulled into my driveway. Frank, from next door, returning from his daily trip to the grocery store. He stepped out, grocery bags in hand, and assessed the situation with the quick perception of a former police officer. "Everything all right here, Ellie?" he called, setting his bags down and straightening to his full height. Still impressive at 80. Marcus turned, clearly recognizing he now had an audience. "This is a private family matter." Frank moved to stand beside me at my door, his presence solid and reassuring. "Doesn't look private to me." "Looks like you're causing a disturbance at my neighbor's home. Might want to rethink that approach, son." Marcus's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This isn't over," he said quietly, the threat clear despite his lowered voice. "Not by a long shot." He stalked back to his car and drove away with a screech of tires against pavement. "Thank you, Frank," I said with genuine gratitude. He waved it off. "That's your son-in-law, isn't it? The lawyer? Seems like a real piece of work." "You don't know the half of it," I sighed, then made a quick decision. "Would you like to come in for coffee? I could use a friend right now." Over the next 2 hours, I told Frank everything. Rebecca and Marcus's attempts to take my house, Robert's secret preparations, the legal battle, Rebecca's recent change of heart. It felt incredibly freeing to share the burden with someone who had no stake in the outcome beyond genuine concern for my well-being. "You know," Frank said thoughtfully after I finished, "my wife Martha dealt with something similar before she passed. Her nephew tried to get control of her mother's estate, Martha's inheritance. Got nasty." "What happened?" I asked. "Martha went public, told the whole family what he was trying to do. The shame of being exposed stopped him cold." Frank shrugged. "Sometimes the best disinfectant is sunlight." His words stayed with me after he left. Sunlight. Exposure. The very thing Marcus would fear most. damage to his carefully cultivated professional and social reputation. I thought again of the recordings Robert had left me, the nuclear option. I had been holding them in reserve, hoping they wouldn't be necessary. But Marcus's visit today, his threats and determination, suggested that legal boundaries alone might not be sufficient deterrent. That night, I listened again to several of the recordings, hearing with fresh ears the calculated way Marcus had probed for financial information, had suggested I might need management after Robert's death, had positioned himself as the logical steward of our assets. The next morning, I made a decision and called Attorney Chen. I have additional evidence, I told him. Recordings Robert made of conversations with Marcus and Rebecca. Legally obtained, one-party consent. They clearly document their intentions regarding my assets, dating back years before Robert's death. Chen was silent for a moment. This changes things significantly. With these recordings, we could potentially pursue legal action against Marcus for attempted elder abuse and fraud. At minimum, they provide irrefutable evidence should he continue his attempts to gain control of your assets. I don't want to use them that way, I said. Not yet. I want to give Rebecca a chance to fully separate herself from the situation of her own accord. But I do want Marcus to know they exist, to understand what he's risking if he continues down this path. A strategic reveal, Chen mused, showing your hand just enough to make him fold. It could work, especially for someone as reputation conscious as Marcus appears to be. We formulated a plan. Chen would request a meeting with Marcus at his law office, neutral territory. I would attend, along with Chen's paralegal as a witness. We would play a small sample of the recordings, enough to demonstrate their nature and existence without revealing their full extent. Then we would make it clear. If Marcus persisted in his attempts to gain control of my assets or challenge my competency, the recordings would become part of the public record in any legal proceedings. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. I spent the weekend in a strange state of calm determination. I called Rebecca and left a message simply saying I wouldn't be available for our usual Tuesday lunch that week. I didn't mention the planned confrontation with Marcus. That was a bridge we would cross afterward, depending on the outcome. Monday morning arrived with perfect June weather. Clear skies, gentle breeze, the kind of day that normally would have found me gardening or reading on the porch. Instead, I dressed in a simple but elegant navy dress, pearl earrings, low heels, battle armor of a different sort. Chen picked me up at 10. His paralegal, a young woman named May with a razor-sharp intelligence evident in her eyes, already in the back seat. We drove in companionable silence to the imposing glass building in downtown Hartford, where Chen's firm occupied the 12th floor. "Are you ready for this?" Chen asked as we rode the elevator up. I nodded, feeling strangely serene. More than ready. Marcus was already waiting in the conference room, his expression guarded but confident. He rose when I entered but didn't offer his hand. "Eleanor, Mr. Chen." He nodded curtly. "I trust this won't take long. Some of us have actual work to attend to." The condescension in his tone might once have intimidated me. Now it simply reinforced my resolve. "We'll be as efficient as possible," Chen replied, gesturing for everyone to sit. "We've asked for this meeting to share some information that may influence your decisions going forward regarding Mrs. Mitchell's assets." Marcus leaned back in his chair, the picture of relaxed confidence. "If this is about the cease and desist, I should inform you I've consulted with several colleagues who believe we have solid grounds to challenge it. This isn't about the cease and desist," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "This is about evidence." Chen placed a small digital recorder on the table and pressed play. The room filled with Robert's voice, then Marcus's, in a conversation from early 2019 that I had selected specifically for its clarity of intent. "Eventually, Eleanor will need assistance managing these assets," Marcus's recorded voice said smoothly. "Women of her generation often struggle with financial complexities. It would be in everyone's best interest if the transition of control happened smoothly, before any issues arise." "And who do you envision controlling these assets?" Robert had asked, his tone neutral but recording everything. "Well, obviously Rebecca and I would ensure they're properly managed, for Eleanor's benefit, of course, but also with an eye toward family legacy, the grandchildren's education, future security." I watched Marcus's face as the recording played. The blood drained from it slowly, his expression shifting from confidence to shock, to something approaching fear. When Chen stopped the recording, silence filled the room. "That's," Marcus began, then stopped, recalibrated. That's clearly been taken out of context. A harmless conversation between family members. We have dozens more, I said quietly. From 2017 to just before Robert's diagnosis. All legally recorded with one-party consent. All documenting your systematic attempts to position yourself to take control of our assets. Marcus's eyes darted between Chen and me, calculating. What exactly are you implying? That checking on my mother-in-law's welfare is somehow sinister? That caring about family finances is criminal? What's on these recordings goes well beyond familial concern, Chen replied, particularly when viewed alongside your recent attempts to have Mrs. Mitchell declared incompetent without medical basis, your unauthorized access to her safety deposit box, and your continued pressure regarding her home. So what? Marcus's composure was cracking. You'll sue me? On what grounds? We hope it won't come to that, I said, leaning forward slightly. All I want is to live in peace, in my own home, managing my own affairs. I'm not interested in public battles or family scandal. Then why am I here? Why this ambush with recordings made without my knowledge? Because you need to understand what's at stake if you continue, Chen explained calmly. These recordings, if made public as part of legal proceedings, would be professionally devastating. The Connecticut Bar Association takes a very dim view of attorneys who attempt to manipulate elderly relatives for financial gain. The implication hung in the air. Marcus's law license, his professional reputation, his standing in the community, all potentially at risk. You wouldn't, he said, but uncertainty had replaced his earlier arrogance. Rebecca wouldn't allow it. Rebecca doesn't know about the recordings yet, I replied. I've been trying to protect her from the full reality of your actions, but if forced to defend myself legally, I will use every tool available to me. Even if that means everyone, including your partners at the firm, your social circle, the parents at Emma and Jacob's school, learns exactly what kind of man you are. Marcus was silent for a long moment, his legal mind visibly processing options, scenarios, outcomes. I could almost see him weighing the potential gain against the now much more concrete risk. What exactly do you want? He finally asked, his voice tight. As I said, peace, independence, respect for my boundaries. I folded my hands calmly on the table. A complete cessation of all attempts to control my assets or challenge my competency. No more pressure about the house. No more unauthorized access to my accounts or information. No more manipulative tactics involving the grandchildren. And in return, the recordings remain private. This conversation remains private. You maintain your professional reputation. And perhaps in time, we find a way to have some kind of civil family relationship again, for the grandchildren's sake if nothing else. Another long silence as Marcus calculated, considered, reassessed. I could see the moment he made his decision. A slight shift in his shoulders. A barely perceptible exhale of defeat. Fine, he said flatly. You win. Keep your house. Keep your money. But don't expect warm family gatherings going forward. That's up to you, I replied. And Rebecca. And the children, of course. Chen slid a document across the table. We've prepared a formal agreement reflecting these terms. Review it with your own counsel if you wish, but be aware that any further actions against Mrs. Mitchell's interests will result in these recordings becoming evidence in legal proceedings. Marcus took the document without reading it. Is that all? For now, Chen confirmed. Marcus stood, straightening his expensive suit jacket with a sharp tug. I underestimated you, Eleanor. And Robert, apparently. It won't happen again. That's the idea, I said quietly. After he left, I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. You did beautifully, Chen said, gathering his materials. Robert would be proud. It's not over, I cautioned. Marcus isn't one to accept defeat gracefully. No, but he's rational, self-interested. He'll calculate the risks and conclude they're not worth taking. Chen smiled reassuringly. And if he doesn't, we have the recordings ready. As I left the building and stepped into the bright June sunshine, I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Not just the immediate threat from Marcus, but something larger, the burden of passivity, of surrender, of allowing others to determine my worth and place in the world. I thought of Robert's words from his letter. You are stronger than you know. You will survive this like a phoenix. Not just surviving, but soaring. For the first time since his death, I truly believed he was right. 1 year later, I sat on my back porch, watching cardinals flit between the oak branches, their bright red feathers a vivid contrast against the lush summer green. My garden was in full bloom, roses climbing the trellis Robert had built, hydrangeas heavy with blue blossoms along the fence line, tomato plants already bearing fruit in the raised beds. So much had changed. So much remained the same. The house on Sycamore Lane was still mine, its familiar creaks and corners a comfort rather than a burden. I still volunteered at the literacy program and community kitchen, finding purpose and connection in helping others. I still had coffee with Frank next door every Thursday morning, our friendship having deepened into something that made us both blush occasionally when neighbors commented on it. But within these constants, transformation had occurred. In me, in my relationships, in my understanding of family and worth and independence. Marcus had indeed calculated the risks and determined that further action against me wasn't worth the potential cost to his reputation. The legal agreement he signed that day in Chen's office held firm. He maintained a cool civility on the rare occasions we encountered each other, but made no further attempts to influence my financial decisions or living arrangements. Rebecca's journey had been more complex, more painful, and ultimately more hopeful. After learning about the recordings, which I finally shared with her during a difficult but necessary conversation last fall, she had moved out of the Colonial, taking Emma and Jacob to a modest rental house closer to their school. The separation from Marcus was officially temporary, a chance to reassess priorities, but a year had passed with no signs of reconciliation. Our relationship had been rebuilt slowly, cautiously, with none of the easy assumption of connection that had once existed between us. Every Tuesday, we still had lunch together. Sometimes the conversation flowed naturally. Other times we struggled to bridge the chasm of hurt and betrayal that still yawned between us. But we kept showing up, kept trying, kept choosing to move forward together rather than apart. The grandchildren came to visit now, without the rigid supervision of earlier years. Emma, now 11, helped me in the garden, showing a natural talent for nurturing growing things. Jacob, 8, loved to hear stories about his grandfather, absorbing every detail of the man he barely remembered but somehow recognized in himself. Last month, Rebecca had asked if they could stay with me for a week, while she attended a teaching certification program, a new career path she'd chosen, returning to the profession I had once loved. The week had been chaotic, exhausting, and absolutely joyful. We had made Robert's famous chocolate chip pancakes on Sunday morning. We had built a fort from sofa cushions in the living room. We had planted sunflower seeds along the fence line and made a solemn pact to send photos as they grew. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when old patterns threatened to reemerge, when Rebecca made an offhand comment about the house's market value, when she questioned a financial decision I'd made. But now I had the strength to address these moments directly, to set boundaries firmly but kindly, to insist on the respect I deserved. And Rebecca, to her credit, was learning, trying, changing in ways that suggested she was finding her way back to the values Robert and I had tried to instill in her before money and status, and Marcus had clouded her vision. A knock at the gate interrupted my thoughts. Rebecca stood there, dressed in casual clothes rather than the designer outfits she had once favored, a cloth grocery bag in her hand. "I brought fresh bagels," she called. "And that strawberry cream cheese you like." I waved her in, watching as she navigated the garden path with familiar ease. "The hydrangeas are spectacular this year," she commented, settling into the chair beside me. "Dad would have loved seeing them like this. He always said they were showing off." I smiled at the memory. "Too many flowers for one bush," he'd say. Rebecca laughed, a genuine sound that had once been rare but was becoming more common. He was right. They're absolutely shameless. We ate our bagels in companionable silence for a while, watching the birds, enjoying the perfect summer morning. "I've been offered a teaching position," Rebecca said eventually. "4th grade, at Lincoln Elementary." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased. "When do you start?" "September. The pay is, well, it's a significant adjustment from what I'm used to." She grimaced slightly. Marcus made sure to point that out when I told him. "Money isn't everything," I said simply. Rebecca looked at me then, really looked at me, in a way that reminded me of the thoughtful child she had once been. "No, it isn't. I'm finally understanding that." She hesitated, then added, "Dad understood it all along, didn't he?" That's why he lived the way he did, why you both did. We had what mattered, I agreed. Each other, a home we loved, work that meant something, enough to be comfortable without being consumed by always wanting more. I want that, Rebecca admitted quietly. For myself, for the kids, that sense of, I don't know, sufficiency, contentment. It's available to you, I told her. It always has been. She nodded, her gaze drifting to the garden, the trees, the birds, the simple beauty that had sustained me through grief, betrayal, and recovery. I've been thinking about selling the Colonial, she said after a moment. It's too big for just the three of us. Too expensive. Too empty, somehow. What about Marcus? He can buy me out if he wants to keep it, or we can sell and split the proceeds. She shrugged. Either way, I'm ready for something different. Something that feels like a home, not a showpiece. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. She was now making the same decision about downsizing that she had once tried to force on me, but her reasons were entirely different. Authentic, chosen rather than imposed. I think that sounds like a wise decision, I said carefully, not wanting to push. I found a little Cape Cod-style house near the elementary school, she continued, a hint of excitement creeping into her voice. 3 bedrooms, a fenced yard for the kids, walking distance to the park. It needs some work, but she trailed off, suddenly self-conscious. Sorry, I'm rambling. Don't apologize. It sounds perfect. It's actually a lot like the house you and Dad had when I was little, before Sycamore Lane. Do you remember? Of course I do. I smiled, touched that she remembered it too. The yellow house on Maple Street, with the window seat in the living room where you used to read. That's the one. Rebecca's eyes grew distant with memory. I was happy there. We all were. We were happy because we were together, I said gently. Because we had enough. Because we knew what mattered. Rebecca reached over and took my hand, a gesture so unexpected, so reminiscent of the daughter I had once known so well, that tears sprang to my eyes. I'm trying to find my way back to that, she said softly. To what matters. To who I was before. Everything. I know you are. I squeezed her hand. And I'm proud of you for it. We sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped, the summer breeze carrying the scent of roses around us. Not fully healed, not completely reconciled, but moving steadily in that direction. Choosing connection over division. Choosing love over resentment. Choosing family, true family, defined by mutual care and respect, over the hollow imitation it had become. A flash of red caught my eye, a cardinal landing on the nearby feeder, its bright plumage vibrant in the morning light. Rebecca saw it too. Dad's checking on us, she said with a small smile, making sure we're okay. We are, I replied, and for the first time in years I fully believed it. We really are. Later, after Rebecca had left for a parent-teacher meeting at the kids' school, I walked through my house, the house Robert had built with his hands, his heart, his vision of our future together. I ran my fingers along the kitchen counter, where we had prepared countless meals. I straightened a picture frame on the mantel, Rebecca's graduation from Brown, all 3 of us beaming with pride and possibility. So much had happened within these walls, joy and grief, betrayal and reconciliation, endings and beginnings. I thought of Robert's final gift to me, not just the legal protections or the trust, or even the recordings that had ultimately forced Marcus to back down, but the faith he had shown in my strength, the belief that I could not just survive without him, but thrive, the understanding that I was not merely an extension of him or an appendage to Rebecca's life, but a whole person with my own value, my own purpose, my own right to dignity and respect. You were right, my love, I whispered to the empty room that somehow still held his presence. I did rise from this, not just surviving, but soaring. Outside, the cardinal took flight from the feeder, a streak of brilliant red against the endless blue sky.